Now I think it's right.
Did we just not go through something?
I don't know. I didn't. I haven't.
Peggy Harris calling just came and he was like, Peggy Harris is trying to watch it.
I know.
We can get it on. I was like,
I'm trying. Give me a minute. Let's see what she says. Let me call Ashley and tell her to check it real quick. That's the problem. How do I just call Ashley? No, I just told her, check it now. Let me call her. Oh, got it.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. We thought the prayer time was being broadcast, but apparently it was not. So for those of you who just got on the stream, we're glad you're with us now. I wanted to give you that address real quick for Tom and Jeannie Duvall. If you want to send a card, I do have that now. It is 6063 Millstone Run. I'll give you a second. I should have waited for you to get your pens out. Or your phone, you can put it on your phone.
It's working now.
6063 Millstone Run. And that's here in Stone Mountain. The zip code is 30087. So you can address it to either Tom or Jeannie. And again, her birthday is this coming Friday. 6063 Millstone Run. Stone Mountain, that's correct. Stone Mountain. All right, let me introduce you to the text that will be informing the study that we're on. And if you would like to buy a copy, I encourage it. They're great. We will start with the Bible. I'm hoping most in this room have a copy of the Bible. If not, we can provide one. Exodus 20. That is where we find the Ten Commandments, and the Ten Commandments is going to be the focus of this study. I only have 5 weeks to do it, so we got to cover 2 commandments a week. But we can do it. I think we can finish. There are 2 great books on the Ten Commandments, and I recommend both to you. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that either is still being published. Thankfully, Amazon takes care of everything, and eBay or somebody. You can find these books somewhere if you want to buy them, and they weren't that expensive. To My People with Love is the name of the first one. To My People with Love, the Ten Commandments for Today, and it is written by John Killinger. John Killinger. I think it was published in the 80s. Yep, 88. John Killinger was actually my religion professor at Stanford when I was there as a student. The second book is entitled Smoke on the Mountain. This will actually probably be a little bit easier to find. It's by Joy Davidman, who was married to C.S. Lewis. There's an amazing movie about their love story called Shadowlands. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. One of my very favorite movies. It's sad, but it's really, really good. So Smoke on a Mountain is older than John Killinger's book, but it is excellent. Some of the examples and illustrations will say the recent war. That would be World War II. So it's not as recent now as it was when this book was written. But you can understand the references and you can still gain from it. It has all this timeless truth, and I think it's such a well-written book and study. So those are the 2 resources I'm going to be drawing on most. Smoke on the Mountain, Joy Davidman, and To My People with Love, John Killinger. All right, the 10 Commandments in the modern world. Why do these matter? Are there any answers? The silence in the room is deafening. Why do these still matter? What?
Most of the secular laws in a lot of countries were based on the Ten Commandments.
Most of the secular laws in a lot of countries were based on the Ten Commandments, okay? At least some of them. There's a basis for the law code that has existed Ever since then, you can point to a lot of law codes that include elements of the Ten Commandments for sure.
Oh, it's kind of like manners. Why do manners matter? Does that make sense?
They were from God.
It does. Sometimes I'm worried they don't anymore, but yes, I'm with you. Manners. But it's a little beyond manners, right? I mean, it's a little deeper than just manners.
Manners, but
I hear you. I don't disagree.
Instruction from God.
Instruction from God. They look a lot like rules. When I was a child, that's what I thought. They were the 10 rules. And very few children like rules. That is not something we aspire to. The 8 of the 10 are thou shalt nots, which are the worst kind of rules. And the 2 that are thou shalt are actually deceptively so. Thou shalt honor their father and mother, but I was told that just means don't disobey them. So it's still thou shalt not. And thou shalt honor the Sabbath, and I was told that means don't work. I remember, and probably you do too, a time when everything was closed on Sunday. When I was a child in St. Louis, Missouri, so from about the age of 5, 1981 is when we moved there. The Chesterfield Mall, where we went every Sunday after church, there was only one thing open in the Chesterfield Mall, York Steakhouse. And we ate there, and every other store was closed for the entire day on Sunday. That was the only thing that could be open. Now, by the time we left St. Louis, 1988, everything was open. During that 5 or 6 year period, everything changed. Honor the Sabbath. Now that was a time when the laws were being used in force. In a sense, the 10 Commandments. I always talk to people who say, you know, in the old days, we used to all go to church on Sunday. And I said, well, you know, in the old days, there was nothing else to do on Sunday. Because I remember those days. You had a couple of different options. You went to church, or you watched TV, or you stared at a wall. There were no other activities. There were no stores to go to. Everything else was closed. So the choice you are facing is not the same choice that families are facing today. Families today are facing something different. We still need to find a way to honor the Sabbath, but I don't mind confessing to you as a pastor when somebody comes and says, my child has the state swim meet on Sunday morning, and I am so sorry we're going to miss church, but they have trained for this all year. I wouldn't have planned it on a Sunday. I don't guilt them into saying, well, you should be here if you want to honor the Sabbath. The commandment says it. We live in a different world, so how do we reimagine Sabbath? Well, that's further where to go tonight. All right. When we study the book of Leviticus, we look at laws. That's why we never study the book of Leviticus. And when you look at the laws, you realize some of those laws are outdated. And many of those laws are not practiced, at least by Christians. Actually, they're not practiced by anyone, except for a handful of Orthodox Jews. So we may disagree on how to interpret and to apply the law, but when I teach Leviticus, as I have now twice at some of our assisted care communities, one of the things I always say is the reason Leviticus matters and the 10 Commandments matter and rules matter is they tell us what we do matters. If there are no rules, if it doesn't matter what we do, then life is really meaningless. If all things really are equal, there is no right or wrong, then existence itself, everybody goes and does whatever they want with no deeper meaning or purpose to it. God, what Leviticus tells us, and the 10 Commandments, God cares about how we live. God cares about us, and God cares about what we do. And that's important for us to hear as Protestants. It's also important for us to hear as Baptists, Because sometimes we as Baptists really focus on what we believed. And what we believe matters. But that's not the only thing that matters. The Ten Commandments have some things about beliefs in them, but it also has things about what you are doing or not doing. And sometimes I think we as Baptists overemphasize the belief and underemphasize the doing part of faith. My Catholic wife helped me to learn that. If God cares about how we live and what we do, we should care. And Jesus knew these Ten Commandments. In fact, Jesus knew the book of Leviticus and quotes it sometimes. If there's no other reason for you to read it, you should read it because you follow Jesus. And Jesus knew and loved that book. And Jesus knew and loved these laws. What we don't have to do, the temptation, I think, in our world a lot of times is to try to post the Ten Commandments everywhere. If you go to Bardwell, Kentucky, where I was born, I assume it's the same way today, you will find about 80% of the yards have the Ten Commandments in them. Because it is a social liability to not put the Ten Commandments in your yard. Now, not more than 20% of Bardwell, Kentucky goes to church on any given Sunday. And I would argue, and I love Bardwell, that's my place, the people of Bardwell are not practicing these laws any more than people anywhere else. They're just posting them. And when we get focused on posting the laws in our lawns or on school boards or on monuments here, there, and everywhere, it's all well and good. Sometimes it's not, but we forget that what matters and why God gave us the laws was not to post them. It was to practice them. It was to live them and embody them and do them. And if we want everyone to learn and love the Ten Commandments, we need to start living the Ten Commandments. The Israelites, I'm still in the introduction, but I'm going to get through two, don't worry. The Israelites have left Egypt. And John Killinger says, God says to them, in essence, I love you. How do you know I love you? Look at what I've done for you. I heard your prayers, and I brought you here, out of Egypt. And actually, the reason I'm giving you these laws is because I love you. The law is an expression of God's love. I want you to live in such a way that you can find joy and productivity. I mean, we know that rules can be an expression of love because anybody who's been a parent or grandparent or aunt or anything else knows you have rules for your kids. And you don't have the rules because you don't love them. You have the rules because you do love them. And you don't want them to get hurt. You don't want them to make the same mistakes that you made. You want to help them. Rules matter. And God says, I love you, and that's why we're given the Ten Commandments. If you learn and live by them, you'll be blessed. I've just summarized the first 5 books of the Old Testament. If you live by the law, God will bless you. If you disobey, you will be cursed. Actually, that's especially the book of Deuteronomy. Sarah Orne Jewett wrote this novel called The County of Pointed Firs. And in it, she says that there was this woman who went up to see a retired sea captain named Elijah Tilley. And as she's walking to his home, which is in Scotland, on a knoll, she notices that on this property there are all these wooden stakes. And she looks around and she can't really figure out that they don't seem to be the property line. They're not around the perimeter. They're just here, there, and everywhere. And so as soon as she gets to the door, she asks the Captain Tilly what all those stakes are about. And he explains that when he first came there, he began to plow the ground, and his plow snagged on rocks just below the surface. And he said, so I went and I put a stake where each of those rocks is. And they're there to remind me these are the trouble spots. Avoid these. Avoid these, and you won't snag your plow. And John Killinger writes, that's what the Ten Commandments are. These are the stakes that say these are the trouble spots. And if you can avoid these things, you won't snag your plow. You'll know how to live and how to be productive and to do what God's called us to do. First commandment. What is the first commandment? This is not one of our memory verses. No points off if you don't know it. What is it? You shall have no other gods before me. And Killinger says this is the big commandment. All of the others rest on it or are built on it. And obeying all of the others without it, while it might be good, it would ultimately be empty. It would give you ethics, but not theology. It would not tell you why you're doing this. The foundation is, you shall have no other gods before me. Notice how that's phrased. Have you ever paid attention to it? No other gods. What do you think about that? Anything sound strange?
Well, there were a bunch of gods, different, they worshiped all the time.
It's a lot of different gods.
I mean, false gods.
And there's not a, you need to believe in God. That's not what it says. You know why? Because in the ancient world, belief in God was a given. But it was normally belief in gods. The Greeks and the Egyptians and the Canaanites, they all had gods. That wasn't an issue. They had gods of the sun and gods of the moon and God of the harvest. And if you read stories, Greek mythology, my son got real into that for a few years, Evan. If you read stories about these old gods, you find that they fought amongst themselves all the time. They messed things up with humans. They were a little bit difficult to understand why they were doing what they were doing. Most of the time, these ancient gods looked very human, but not very good. And not what we would consider very godly. They had power, but they acted oftentimes arbitrarily. They were motivated by exactly the same things that motivate us. So what's radical in this first commandment is not believe in God, it's believe in one God that is above all. What was God's name when Moses met God? I am that I am. I am, I was, I am, I will be. The modern challenge, and these books, like I said, are old, but this is still the modern challenge. It's not finding one God among many gods. It's just finding God. We no longer live in a world that assumes the existence of many gods or any god. And if you need proof of that, I can give you some great Pew research from the nuns and the duns. What many of you grew up with does not exist anymore. That is not an absolute assumption. The question is now, do people believe in a God? Joy Davidman in her book said the tragedy is that we often make that choice without knowing it. Not by denying God, but by losing all interest in God. By living in such a way that God's existence is irrelevant to our lives. And sometimes in place of that, because I do think there's something within the human heart that longs for some sort of transcendence, connection with something bigger than ourselves. So in place of that, we go full circle and we don't create the gods of sun, moon, and harvest, but we create other gods or demigods. Killinger said you create the god of the home and the family, or the god of the market, the stock market, wealth and wealth accumulation, or the god of work, because that's what really defines your existence and your values. Or the opposite, the god of leisure. You live to play. Some call it retirement. Others call it college. But either way, or the god of the body. And you pamper the body, or you starve the body, or you obsess over the food you're eating or the exercise you're getting, toning and tanning and feeling good and looking good. This is it. This is what matters most. Davidman has a different list. She said the demigods in our world are sex, the state, and by this she means basically politics, science, and she says the most subtle is society or the common good, apart from God. And both say none of these things are bad. The home isn't bad, and family isn't bad, and work isn't bad, and rest and leisure are not bad, but they're always secondary. And if they become primary and displace that which matters most in the world and in your life, my life, that's when it becomes sinful. That's when the commandment is broken. It's when we take these demigods or smaller things and place them above. Because everything starts and everything ultimately ends with God. I was reminded of that this week when I did Sandra King's funeral on Sunday and when little Isla was born. And I said in both settings, this is a gift from God. Life was a gift from God. This person was a gift from God. All right, we're going to get done. 7 minutes. Next. Second commandment. Exodus 20, 4 through 6. Somebody just know it? We only know the first one. That's okay. We'll know the second one now. You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on earth beneath, or that is on the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord, am jealous. No, the word I heard in King James, no graven images. No graven images. Now I'll tell you who takes this seriously, the Amish. Some of us went to Amish country recently. No pictures on any wall. Why? Could be a graven image. Worry about even a mirror, because it could distract you from what matters most. And we want to err on the side of extreme caution. I'm not advocating anybody become an Amish person. I'm just telling you that's what they do. And this is the verse they point toward. Graven images. And in fact, we got a doll, because that's what we do when we go places. Emma wanted a doll, and there's no face on it. Because if there was a face on it, it would be a graven image. It can be just a head, but the face makes it a graven image in their understanding. Now in the world, the ancient world, the world of the commandments, as we already talked about, God's were everywhere, and God's word made into images. We read about that even in the Bible, right? Moses goes up, and they start making a golden calf. Aaron first says no, then says yes. They melt everything down, and there's a golden calf. If you go to that part of the world at that time, there were bulls and lions and eagles. You can look at Egyptian mythology and see all of the different images that existed there. So the danger of the first commandment is to believe that God does not exist. And the second is the sin of thinking we can possess God. God exists in this form, and we can own and control God. The second commandment says, don't make God too small. And don't mistake an image for the real. And anything can become an idol. Joy Davidman has this paragraph. I'll read it to you. I hope I'm not going to be stepping on any toes, but I'll read it to you. What shape is an idol? I worship a fishtail Cadillac convertible, brother. All my days I give to offering it oil and polish. Hours of my time are devoted to this ritual, and it brings me luck in all my undertakings. And it establishes me among my fellows as a success in life. What model is your car? $1953, all right? It's interesting, not only are the Amish are worried about this, the Orthodox Church is very worried about this. If you have any friends who are Orthodox, or if you ever get a chance to go to an Orthodox church, you should. You know, they have icons all over the place. Candles in front of icons. We as Baptists, they're kneeling and praying, and they're asking for the prayers of those who have gone before us. But if you look at the icons, even the ones of Jesus, you'll notice the fingers are really long, weirdly long, abnormal. The faces are intentionally long, longer than any normal human face. And the reason they intentionally make these changes to their art is because you should know these are only images and you don't worship an image. They intentionally draw them poorly so there's no confusion that this is the real. There's no chance this is a graven image. This is an image that points you beyond the image, that reminds you of something, but should never be confused with the real. There's a Hebrew legend, I hadn't heard about it until I was reading one of these books, that Abraham was an idol maker. It's not in the Bible, it's just a legend. It's okay. And rabbis who write about this in sort of commentary, they say this is how Adam knew God's call. because he knew what was different from what was made with his hands and what was real and heard and the call of God. He knew something that it had existed and called him, and it was different than anything he had created with his hands. Now, anything can become an idol. Materialism is real. It was real when these books were written, and it was real when the Bible was written. Anything can become an idol. But I do want you to understand, as Christians, there are some religious traditions, Buddhists, Hindus to a certain degree, Gnostics used to believe this, that basically derided possessions as inherently evil. They were opposed to material things, that possessions would lead you astray. Christianity has always said that there are good things in life, and that the good things of life can be enjoyed. Parameters around it, we're talking about the Ten Commandments. But what we value above all things, going back to the first commandment, what we value above all things is God. As Christians, we say God as revealed in Jesus Christ. This is what we value above all things. And if anything distracts us from, or threatens that, or supersedes that, that's when we have to consider sacrificing something. Offering it up. So that we don't lose our vision and our place, and so that God doesn't lose God's place in our lives. The thing about idols tend to promise a lot. If you get this, if you become this, normally they promise you'll be happy. Idols tend to promise a lot, but in the long run they offer little. And the promises prove to be hollow. And the idol, once in our hand, and once we realize, oh, this isn't what we thought we'd be, we create another. Now that's what I'm going to achieve. God and the promises of God, they offer much, and God's promises are true and real. We don't always see it. Sometimes it takes longer. Sometimes we don't see it in our lifetime the way that we thought we would see it. But the idols make promises and don't fulfill them. And God offers God's promise and does. First and second commandments. Next week we'll look at the third and the fourth. Tonight was forming the foundation. I'm looking forward to enjoying this study with you for the next several weeks. Let's pray together. God, for the gift of these 10 commandments, we give thanks. Forgive us, O God, when we've looked at them exclusively as burdens. Help us to see in them, even in them, a blessing. Help us to understand that even the law may be an expression of your love. Help us, O God, in this Lenten season, recognize our own faults and flaws. Forgive us, O God, when we've been distracted by the things around us, or when we've lost sight of that which matters most. Help us, O God, to follow faithfully in the footsteps of Jesus, in whose name we pray. Amen. Thank y'all. That's it. Exactly. You're gonna know what. That was just the first word.
He knew about it ahead of time.
Oh, we're still live. I wonder how we stop this.